So my neighbor gave me this beer in exchange for some homemade cookies. We love a friendly barter system. Elysian Night Owl Pumpkin Ale. Every cradle Catholic I know keeps a handy church key. Oh, very sweet, but rather tasty. Yeah, I could get into that. Welcome to happy hour. Cheers. Mm-hmm. If you follow me on TikTok or Instagram, you may have seen my recap video of the National Book Festival, but if you haven't or you don't know what I mean, here's a quick rundown. The National Book Festival is an annual event put on by the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. It takes place at the Walter E. Washington Convention Center, usually around late summer or early fall. And this year we celebrated its 25th year. It's been going on since 2001. It was originally chaired by First Lady Laura Bush and was put on outside on the National Mall. And I actually have some really fond memories, specifically of the 2005 National Book Festival. I was deep in my Princess Diary spiral, my brother was reading the Magic Treehouse books, and both Meg Cabot and Mary Pope Osborne were there. I got to ask Meg Cabot a question in the Q&A portion of her panel. If memory serves, I asked, "What's your advice for aspiring authors?" To which I think she replied, "Make sure you have a good day job." Which, valid. And then my brother got one of his Magic Treehouse books signed. And having the event outside was pretty fun. You could just sort of wander around the tents, popping into anything that caught your fancy. But I also acknowledge that events outside can sometimes be a logistical nightmare, especially in a city like DC. And with how massive the festival has grown in recent years, the convention center is the right place for it. Now again, this is a Library of Congress event. They certainly have their own programming. And every year, right in the center of the main hall, they have a pavilion that's set up with a rotating selection of presentations, many of which focus around how to take advantage of the library's resources. One of my favorites from last year was actually about queer coding. At different periods throughout history, there was different language used to denote whether someone being written about was gay. And as the eras turn over, sometimes that language gets lost. This presentation really unpacked some of the most obvious cases of queer coding, and how to keep a lookout for that kind of language in historical documents. Really cool information. Also in the main hall is the Roadmap to Reading. This is an exhibit organized by the IMLS, or Institute for Museum and Library Services, where every table represents a different state or U.S. territory, and each table is not only staffed by members of local library organizations from those places, they also feature books by authors from there as well. This is my handy passport. This is put on in conjunction with the Library of Congress's Center for the Book and the chief officers of state library agencies. And the focus is really great reads from great places. There's a list of books from each place for adults and another list for kids. And then the most fun part, it's a map. You can go around to each table, speak to the very nice library staff members, chat about the books they're featuring, and collect a stamp. I clearly didn't get around to all of them. Generally speaking, they need to print these on more stamp-friendly paper. So many smudges. Along with the Roadmap to Reading, the main atrium also has lots of other tables for other organizations. Planet Word, which is one of my favorite museums in DC. Black Girls Code, the Latinx Kidlit Book Festival. There's a massive display for PBS. Highlights, the kids magazine. I didn't see Scholastic there this year, which is a little weird, but I also haven't seen the Washington Post there for the last 2 years. We'll get to some of those. And trust me, there is so much more to this festival than just what can fit in the main atrium. 3 floors of stuff, and they are not small. I mentioned the festival from 20 years ago. God, 20 years ago. Where I got to ask a question at a panel and my brother got a book signed. There are still many author panels and many book signings. And that's where we get to all of this. There were dozens of authors at this festival. I'm going to confidently say over 50, but I don't have an exact number. There are panels about poetry. There are panels on young adult. There are panels on nonfiction, memoir, fantasy. There's some great programming for middle grade readers. And in fact, just in general, this is an extremely kid-friendly event. Not every author who participates in one of the panels is also scheduled to do a book signing, but many of them are, especially the ones that the festival knows will be popular. The Bree Hive would collectively take up arms and riot if Tracy Deonn hadn't done a book signing. And of course, there are plentiful opportunities to spend money. Not only is the Library of Congress gift shop present in order to sell the requisite festival merch, like this. Yeah, there were definitely more than 50 authors. There's also a bookshop on site run by Politics and Prose, a much beloved independent bookseller in the DC area. So now that you've got the lay of the land, this is just my quick review on things that worked, things that didn't, and what I'm hoping to see at the festival next year. Things that worked. Once again, they absolutely nailed it with the selection of authors. There was a panel celebrating 3 US poet laureates. John Green was there. R.L. Stine was there. Yes, goosebumps R.L. Stine. I didn't get to see Fiona Davis's panel, but she's a recent favorite of mine in historical fiction. Renowned actress Gina Davis, who recently wrote a children's picture book, was there. There is absolutely no physical way that one person can make it to every panel. About a dozen are all happening simultaneously in different parts of the convention center. But if just I, by myself, can see V.E. Schwab, Nydia Okorafor, Joe Abercrombie, Shannon Chakraborty, Augustina Bastorica, Stephen Graham Jones, and Tracy Deonn all in one day, Some authors that I would have loved to see but just didn't have the time: Liz Moore, Geraldine Brooks, Joy Harjo, Leigh Bardugo. I haven't gotten around to reading any Kennedy Ryan yet, but she was there. Last year I saw Casey McQuiston and Abby Jimenez on the same panel together. I'm telling you, the Library of Congress knows how to stack this. So huge points for an incredibly varied selection of authors. The moderators, as always, ask excellent questions, and all of them clearly did their research on the books that they were discussing. And we're going without the microphone for the rest of this video because it just decided it hated me. Anyway, great work on the panels, which brings me to my second high point, the volunteers. They did an absolutely fabulous job. There were definitely several hundred of them, all friendly, all nice, all helpful, and all completely on top of their game. And just in general, the entire day was full of great things to see and do. I didn't even talk about the workshops. There are workshops. An all-ages comics workshop with Mariko Tamaki, a poetry writing workshop for teachers. The Story District had kids' books read by their authors. That was adorable to walk past, by the way. It's just a sea of yellow bean bags. My point stands. There is something to do for absolutely everybody. You cannot get bored. Although last year you could get crushed underfoot. And that was another thing I think the festival did a really great job with this year. The layout was so much better. This is a public event. It's totally free. It's not ticketed at all. Anybody can go, which is great. And you know, the point of a library. But the crowds were very chaotic last year, and I was really worried that that would be an issue again. It was not. They clearly listened to people's feedback. They laid everything out very differently. I think they might have had more use of the convention center than they've had in previous years, because the book signing lines and the bookshop also being in the main atrium with all of the other tables I just talked about, when I tell you we were crammed in like sardines. I didn't buy anything last year. No books from Politics and Prose, no merchandise from the festival, nothing. Because I was absolutely terrified of getting squished like a grape. Now this year, both the book signing lines and the Politics and Prose bookshop moved to a different level. This gave the main tables at the atrium a lot more space to spread around, and it also meant that people waiting in line for I don't even know how many hours to get their book signed weren't being confused with the kids waiting to get a stamp from Puerto Rico. And by expanding the bookshop, not only could they allow for more stock, we also didn't feel as though we were elbowing people out of the way just to look at a copy of Buffalo Hunter Hunter. Now for a couple things they could have done better. I am not a book signing girly. If I'm going to wait that long in the same line, it had better be for either a really good roller coaster or something that is designed to entertain me for more than 3 minutes. And as exciting as it would have been to actually get to talk to some of these authors, I really am okay not getting a book signed. And this copy is already signed right there. All of this to say, I did not experience the chaos of the book signing lines myself, but I did hear that we're not totally there yet. Better than last year is what I was told, but there still isn't a great way to control the number of people who try to cut in line, and that can be a really tricky thing for volunteers to navigate. How, when you don't really have a lot of authority as a volunteer, are you able to find the assertion to say to a person, hey, person who's been waiting for 2 hours, back of the line? That can be a really awkward thing to manage. I wonder if they benefit from counter numbers, like the old-fashioned ones at the butcher shop where you take your number and that's your number. I don't know if they could do that for every line though. Again, it's a lot of authors. So I didn't deal with the book signing lines, but I will say that the Politics and Prose lines moved very quickly. Crowd control for the lines getting into the panels was very well handled, but I do get why people who were hoping to have things signed are upset. I also heard a little chatter, and this is something that came up last year as well, about the wish for a 2-day event. I have a strong feeling that that's not going to happen anytime soon. There are folks like me who would happily go to 2 days worth of this. There are also folks who can't make it on a Saturday who a Sunday would be more convenient for. But just generally speaking, even the 1-day event that's put on is an unbelievable amount of work that the Library of Congress takes on every year. There were a couple of years a while ago where it was a 2-day event, but it didn't last long, and I think that's for a reason. And this year, with its current setup, it was very manageable. I don't see a 2-day event happening. Here's what I would love to see happen. I want the Washington Post back. Controversial take. That is not a perfect periodical. I'm going to say that again. That is not a perfect periodical. However, the programming that used to be put on by the book section of the Washington Post, I want that back. The Washington Post had no presence this year. It had no presence last year, but the year before, there was a fantastic panel with one of the editors about the role of comic books in literature. According to the Library of Congress website, the Washington Post is still a listed media partner of the festival, just not a presenting one for this year or last year. I won't speculate as to why that could be. But I definitely felt its absence last year, and while that absence wasn't immediately obvious to me, given the new layout of this year's festival, it was something that I looked for. And finally, there are a couple of other media partners that I would like to see have a larger presence. C-SPAN Book TV was there recording content, but you wouldn't have known that if you hadn't gone to any of the programming on the lower floor. NPR and Libro FM also had presences there, but I was a little surprised to see that they didn't have anything scheduled. The tables were there, they were staffed, you could walk up and say hello, but given how much content is attached to each each of those platforms, why wouldn't Libro FM give a presentation on the importance of audiobooks? NPR is listed as a presenting partner. I didn't see them present anything. And maybe I didn't look hard enough, but it's NPR. I want you to tell me things. All in all, this is still a great event. I was thrilled to go. I'm excited for next year. And if my major gripes are please more programming and better organized book signing lines, we can call that a success, because last year was absolutely bonkers. If you're seeing this on a Wednesday, thank you so much for being a Bindery subscriber. And if you're seeing this on a Thursday, please consider subscribing to both my YouTube channel and my Bindery. Links down below. I forgot that part last week. Bindery is where all of my bookish content can live in one place. It's also where my subscribers get early access to some of the things that I post on YouTube. It's also a community-driven publishing house, but you'd have to follow me there to find out more. And thank you very much for joining me for happy hour.